preacher mounted the pulpit, checked to see whether the mic was working, found that it wasn't, and said, "There's something wrong with this mic." And the people all responded, "And also with you." Please be seated. Well, good morning, church. I picked that opening that I sometimes use at the beginning of the service up in Bermuda, where in the Anglican churches, which were, well, Anglican, they didn't do that. But in black churches, they did. People would get up when they had a reading or if they were starting the service and simply say, "Good morning, church." And I thought, well, that's great because that's what it says. We are the church. Well, we're in the season of Thanksgiving. And to begin personally, I give thanks for this opportunity before us to serve together and to discern our way forward during a time of mixed emotions at Grace Church. We are in the midst of celebrating 150 years of ministry and service here in this community and beyond. I arrived the very week you brought those celebrations to a head, and that wonderful weekend gathering of fellowship, church culture, and worship last Sunday. It was one of those mountaintop experiences. What a joyful experience it was for me, too, to join with my friends and colleagues, Archbishop Hiltz and Dean Stout, in worship with you, guided for my part by your priest associate, Micah. It was, as others have commented, a jump in the deep end for me. Fortunately for me, I'm a good swimmer. But in saying all that, the fact that I am here and not your incumbent Martha, uncertainty threatens to reduce the momentum generated by these celebrations. Uncertainty breeds anxiety, but it also opens us to opportunity. And while both you and I may have uncertainty about where to go from here, we're also open to any opportunity to relieve our anxiety and to move forward in hope. Well, I will resist my inclination to get ahead of this process and start to give shape to this hope at this point. As the scriptures say, we walk by faith and not by sight. At this point, I can only offer myself as an agent of hope. And along with you, I can't wait to see how God will take our offerings of ourselves, our souls, our bodies to fulfill our Creator's purposes here in Forest Hill at this time. Having said this, I come back to the season of Thanksgiving and say that I believe that gratitude is the mother of all hope. From gratitude springs hope. To come back to this season of, as I have to say that over my years of ministry here in the Diocese of Toronto, and for a period of 12 years in the Diocese of Bermuda, 3.5 of which were as bishop, I've always experienced Thanksgiving as a no-brainer. I mean, of course, we're thankful. This is not just Thanksgiving for the blessings of harvest that we celebrate here in church. It's also Thanksgiving for the blessings we enjoy as Canadians. Today in church, we think of harvest, but along with the wider community, we think of Canada in all its wonder, cheer, grandeur of our territory, the uniqueness of our culture, the abundance of our resources, and despite our proximity with arguably the most powerful nation ever to exist upon the earth, despite that, we have this determination to distinguish ourselves from that power and its self-declared manifest destiny. And so, yes, we have much to be thankful for. Hardly a week goes by that I don't hear someone say how blessed and privileged we are to live in this country. It is a no-brainer. But to be completely honest, I have to say that this year, for possibly the first time, I'm having difficulty being thankful because of the problems we're facing as a country. You know the list: growing homelessness, exploding use of food banks, unaffordable housing, lack of family physicians, lack of accessible mental health treatment, death after death from fentanyl, persistent residual effects of the treatment of Indigenous Canadians, deep divisions over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and escalation in anti-Semitism. Somebody said to me after the early service, well, it's not just anti-Semitism, it's anti-everything. It's everybody. Who else is other? I do not recall a time when there were so many issues pressing upon us for our attention. It's not as if I am ungrateful for the many good things we enjoy as a people. It's just that to be thankful in the midst of so much suffering seems somehow insensitive. It's as if I live in an insulated bubble filled with light, with that rainbow-like gloss that makes bubbles so visually magical. But of course, it's not quite true. I'm not fully insulated. I do know some of this suffering at first hand, and I do have the capacity to relieve some of it. And ironically, I'm thankful for that. But do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed and rather helpless in the face of all this? This morning's scriptures speak directly to this and offer us hope, hope that comes as a gift from God. The prophet Joel speaks of the restoration of the land after a natural disaster, and how those words, natural disaster, resonate with us today. We just think of the coming to an end of the fire season across North America, across the world, in fact. Hurricanes and the damage and the power that we've experienced on this continent, but it's true across the world as well in the Pacific. The psalmist speaks of the experience of being abandoned by God, but continuing to cling to his belief that somehow God will rescue him. And how many of our fellow Canadians also feel forsaken and abandoned? We recognize the opening words of the psalm as those of Jesus from the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And in those words, we find Jesus identifying with those who've also felt they have been abandoned, whether by God or by government or family or their country, their community. St. Paul, writing to Timothy, instructs his young mentee to pray for those in authority in the land, saying it is God's will that followers of Christ should do this. It is to pray for peace, order, and good government. And how much we struggle with this today, nationally and locally. And I just have a little confession to make. Now, thinking about this, what Timothy's saying here, there's a prayer in the Book of Common Prayer, which comes very early in the service, which is a prayer for the monarch. It's not prayer for all in authority, but prayer for the monarch. And of course, that was Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth for the longest time. When I came to that prayer, and I said to them, I'm going to use this prayer this morning because St. Paul is instructing us to do so. I couldn't remember the name of the king. I wanted to call him George, but the congregation corrected me. Now, finally, we have the teaching of Jesus about the pointlessness of worry. Well, that's worth a sermon in itself. The truth is, the only thing that worry changes is the person worrying, taking their peace and increasing their anxiety. Now, here's the tricky part. It's not as if Jesus is saying the kinds of things he lists, food, shelter, clothing, are not important. I mean, it's sure important to the people who don't have it. And of course, they are, he says, and God knows we need them, and God will see that we get them. It's just that as followers of his, we should not build our lives around getting them, but work rather in the spirit of supplying the needs of others to make sure they get them. It is following the prayer he taught us. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's not about earning our way to heaven, but on joining God in the great project of building heaven on earth. Now, we're a long way from building anything that looks like heaven on earth. But that's the project we are called into by God as a people of faith. And every once in a while, we catch a glimpse of it. And then I was thinking about this, these words came to me, and the picture that immediately leapt to mind, which kind of surprised me, may surprise you too, is, and it's hard to say this without emotion, watching Terry Fox run up Yonge Street in Richmond Hill, past the church where I was serving at that time. I leave it to you on this Thanksgiving weekend to think of your own glimpse of heaven on earth. Be fueled by it, be inspired by it, receive the gift of hope that springs like fresh, clean, cold water springing from a crevice in a rock on a hot day as you join your fellow travelers on this journey, seeking first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness. What do we conclude our service with? The priest or the deacon says, "Go forth to love and serve the Lord." And what do we respond? Thanks be to God. Let me conclude with these words from the hymn, "Lead On, O King Eternal." Lead on, O King Eternal, till sin's fierce war shall cease, and holiness shall whisper the sweet amen of peace. For not with swords loud clashing, nor roll of stirring drums, but deeds of love and mercy, the heavenly kingdom comes. Happy Thanksgiving.